So the biggest thing was establishing the portfolio. And, you know, when we started, we lifted the hood and we basically had this beautiful, beautiful project chaos of stuff everywhere. There was bodies, there was limbs, you know, there was an absolute wash of projects across Kent, and they were strategic projects, projects, not quite projects, pet projects, we don't talk about them projects, and the stuff that we're just doing. And by the time we sort of like shaken the organisation down, we had about 75 things that we could classify as a project. Now, for 75 is a nebulous number to most of you, but it was too much change. The organisation was awash with change that it didn't understand and it couldn't handle, which basically meant we were failing to deliver. Now, this is just an average failure. Now, I always love it when there's something big and exciting and gory and something falls off and everyone has to respond to it, but it was just averagely not performing. And the organisation said, we can do better and we have to do better. Because one, we spend public money, but also we're responsible for 17,000 people in the education and what they're doing. So we decided to start carving away at that portfolio to understand what it was. And I always flip between whether it was opening Pandora's box or playing a game of whack-a-mole, because tackling the portfolio was really hard, it was really complicated. So we decided to do, you know, a bit of traditional prioritisation in terms of how do we classify our projects and what do they look like. And because we're an academic organisation, we decided to do it really elaborately. So we came up with this classification approach that basically resulted in this giant-sized menu that meant every project could be accommodated. It was like standing in a pub, looking at a menu, under pressure what to order and not knowing what to pick, because everything was fine and everything was viable, but it wasn't. And the problem, the first part of the misadventure, is we consulted too much. We asked too many people their opinions about the stuff, and we didn't assume the position of expert. So then in a dark room, we reset the criteria. And we decided that what we were going to focus on was actually what was the most important to the organisation, whether the university recognised that or not. So we chose risk mitigation as the biggest thing, because Kent is under a lot of pressure, as are lots of universities, and impact of both students and staff. And that gave us three. That gave us three things to assess all of our projects with, and we assessed them all. And some casually disappeared into the background. Some were sized, some we started to understand, some were stopped, some were paused, some were reshaped. And we started to pull out what a portfolio was. And it gave us 12 projects that are significant changes that are affecting the organisation, that are delivering value, that have impacts that we understand, have benefits that we can control, have resources that are within our gift, and are actually adding some value to the organisation. And I use some loosely and slightly facetiously, because depending on who you ask, that level of value changes depending on where you are in the organisation. But we still can't handle all the change all the time. So then we shifted our mindset into how do we prioritise the world. And we came up with what I lovingly refer to our should we, could we criteria. And this is how we assess whether we should actually do the thing. So should we is based very much around like the strategy. So is it delivering the strategy? Is it mitigating a risk? Isn't it taking us forward? Is it delivering us benefits that we understand? Does it have objectives that we can tackle? Does it feel like it's the right change? So we assess every project based on should we criteria first. And then we challenge every project with can we do it? So could we criteria? Have we done something like this before? Do we have the capacity? Do we have the capability? Does it stack up financially? Is there an ROI? Is it creating more risk than what it mitigates? And we offset these two criteria against each other, which gives us this little graph that you can see on here. Now, these are real projects at Kent, and they don't have the names on, not because they're, you know, secrets or very exciting, but probably because you just wouldn't care. And what we ended up with basically was a full spectrum of what those projects started to look like. So top my left are the projects that have the best can we and should we outcomes. So they're both strategically brilliant or have great outcomes and an impact that we can really get a handle on, and we know how to do them. So we've either done it before or we've got the capability or we've brought in the capability. So they are our best projects in that top left-hand corner. Bottom right-hand corner, slightly sadder for that project, because not only is it a crap idea, we've got no idea how to do it. So we bid that project goodnight quite quickly, but I've kept it on here just to prove the point. But then what we have is a bit of a challenge in the middle. So we create then the sticky middle, which is basically a group of really lovely but average projects where you can't argue them in and you can't argue them out because they're doing something. Now, the risk that we have from a portfolio management point of view is actually the sticky middle is really powerful, because the sticky middle can reach out to your great initiatives and bring them closer and takes away either the value or the capability from the brilliant ideas. Or, worst case, it gets its hands on that bottom corner and starts to justify their existence. So we have to be really careful with controlling that sticky middle to make sure it doesn't reach too far and start to take on the other stuff. So this is how we assessed our portfolio. So we went from 75 projects that we were panicking about to 12 projects that we actively manage and actively love on a good day. And this portfolio is under the gift of, and this is a terrible title for a board, so do not write this down, the Project and Programme Portfolio Board, which I call the board, and everybody else annoyingly calls the P3B. That's right, but you know, it's a board. It's basically our governance group. And what you'll see, especially in universities, is in governance we like job titles. So it's directors, heads of, DVCs, and people are there because they have a seat at the table, not because they know what they're bloody doing, which is always slightly awkward. But this board was created based on competency and capability and knowledge of a business area. So we have the right people around a table who know how to talk about their people, their capability, their capacity, and can make decisions on behalf of their part of the organisation. That group is responsible for prioritising, approving and assuring all projects. So nothing starts in Kent unless it goes through this board. The board meets once a month. It's relatively light touch. It's massively supported by the PMO. It's almost fun coming to board, but we do it to make sure we start things in the right way, and more importantly, to make sure we finish things, because quite often things just tail off and disappear. But that is how we're establishing and creating the portfolio in our current world. Kim.